Welcome to Fix Your Eyes, 7 days of devotions in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, day 1. The Apostle Paul had a slightly tricky relationship with the church in Corinth. Since establishing the church, false teachers had come in and launched vicious attacks on Paul's character and his ministry, leading many of the Corinthians astray. And Paul had suffered greatly as a result of that. But in God's grace, there had been massive repentance from most of the church, and their relationship with Paul was now restored. And it's into this slightly raw, still painful situation that Paul writes them the letter of 2 Corinthians. And it's surprising to see that he's not bitter or resentful. He doesn't see the suffering as wasted. No, the recurring theme of the letter is that suffering is the means God uses to display his power and glory. And so although raw and painful, this letter is filled with glorious hope. And so at a time when we're perhaps individually, perhaps collectively feeling raw, feeling aware of our own weaknesses, seeing suffering in our own lives and the lives of those around us, this letter speaks wonderful comfort and hope to us too. That through our sufferings, the power and glory of God will be displayed. And as we look at chapter 4 together over the next few days, it's not just going to be a rallying call, a kind of come on girls, we can get through this, there is hope in our suffering. But we're going to look together at why we can say that, why we can say that there's hope. We'll follow Paul's reasons for our hope in the hard times, so that we'll have a solid foundation and not just pithy mantras to live by. Now, my sense of geography is not great, and so when we moved here to Caterham and friends asked me where Caterham was, I learned to say it's south of London and north of Gatwick, which seemed to place it roughly in the right area. So imagine how irrationally excited I was on one of my lockdown walks to discover in the corner of some field somewhere along Pilgrim's Way, there was a spot that gives a remarkable view in one direction of the Shard and the whole of the London skyline, and in the other direction you can see the control towers of Gatwick Airport. And to stand in that place and to look at both of those fixed points really did give me a sense of my place in the geography of the area. And in a similar but far greater way, 2 Corinthians chapter 4 shows us 2 fixed points that make sense of our life in the middle of them. Paul looks back at the cross, at the death and resurrection of Jesus and the glorious gospel that God has revealed to us. And he also looks forward to the future hope that we have in eternity, the reality of eternity with Jesus. And those 2 fixed points then frame what he talks about in the rest of the chapter, about the realities and the difficulties of life here and now in the middle, where things can seem so tough and even overwhelming. And he wants us to really grasp and understand what the gospel is and how glorious eternity is, because then when we view the tough stuff in the middle through the perspective that these 2 fixed points of the gospel and eternity give us, then it is utterly transformative. And so I pray that as we look at this chapter together over the next few days, God will help us understand more and more about the gospel and about eternal glory, so that we can clearly see why in Jesus we can have hope in the hard times.